Hey, today what I wanted to do was kind of talk to you about my creative process as I make a card. And I'm using, like some scraps from my scrap bag. I try to keep scraps and then I use them. I make scrap days and I just use scraps to make my cards. I'm also using the Tart and Tangy set with this card, and what you can't see is the cherries, which I didn't use in this particular card. I wanted to use a fall color palette, so I was using Pear Pizzazz, Pumpkin Pie, and the marker. And I'm using different kinds of ink mediums to show you that you don't have to have all of everything, but if you have a few spots, a few markers, and a few pads, you can end up having everything over time just by using the combination of things. And I like that. And the markers are basically, the most inexpensive way to get and try the colors. Anyway, I'm using a bunch of colors: craft, chocolate chip, pear pizzazz, and some pumpkin pie. And I'm talking over this video, which has been really sped up so that you're not bored to death by this creative process, because there's a lot of thinking and figuring things out. I decided to use a base of pumpkin pie, and I used a little piece of ribbon that was pear pizzazz. Then I said, let me stamp each image like on a different color. And this was a color challenge that I'm trying to live up to here. So that's why I wanted to use different color for each image. And so I used what I thought would be reasonable, without trying to be too realistic. So I have eaten green apples, and I do like oranges, and I made my strawberry. I think I used the Poppy Parade for that because I figured it's really hard not to have a strawberry that's red. And the top of it, just to have some diversity, I decided to make the top of it green. So I had erased and then started over on this stamp just to get that two-tone effect on it, just because I figured it would be a good opportunity to pull that green into one of the images. So I really love the direct to marker direct to stamp technique. So after I had them all stamped, I kind of got picky and started adding something to that strawberry just because it looked a little bit faded out. Maybe I didn't press hard enough, or maybe just maybe I didn't huff after I colored the stamp. I don't know. And I also used my chocolate chip marker to make the little stem on the apple, which you can't see the apple, but that's what I was doing right there, is just kind of putting the stem on. Then I decided, okay, I'm going to cut these out, of course, because they're all crooked on that piece of white paper. I got a little bit anal on the edge there, but I started talking about the idea of glittering these before I cut them out. So there's a ton of different ways of glittering, and I put them all in the notes of this video if you want to look. But for the sake of time, in this particular video, I just grabbed a glitter pen. It was the closest thing to me. And I started really just putting that glitter pen wherever, and I'm thinking actually while I'm doing this. So later on, what I did was I went back and actually filled in more glitter with the same pen. But this would have also looked really great with Dazzling Diamonds. And so I would have taken my two-tone glue and just touched a little bit of the glue on each one of the areas where I wanted to glitter. And then I would have sprinkled the glitter on there and then tapped it off. But I actually did want quite a bit of glitter by the end of this card because I decided to use a sentiment that was called Sparkle. So it was interesting how I kind of changed my mind a little bit about the glitter as I went along. And I really do wish I had used Dazzling Diamonds. I think the glitter would have been a lot brighter. But I was trying to save time. And, there are days when we just want to save time. So, those things are handy in your tools. I punched them out, and then I realized I needed some kind of a mount. So I went and I grabbed my scrap bag and pulled out a piece of chocolate chip that I found. And I was using that. So I was using two punches there, the 1 1/4 and the 1 3/8 punch, I think, just so that each image would have its own little mount. And then I decided to play with them on this piece of craft paper, which was also a scrap, but it was cut down to 4 1/4 because I decided I wanted a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card. And so I'm just kind of moving it around, looking at it next to the base, trying to decide whether I want it vertical or horizontal. After the fact, I really would have liked to use 6 images on that big strip right there. It would have been neat to have a grid of 6 images. So maybe 2 of each of the fruit would have been interesting. But I think I ended up with cutting that down because look, I have a design right here. and I totally went away from it. So this particular design that I'm working on right there is vertical, and so the card is like standing up. But you know, I started putting strips down. Let me get my colors out and blah blah blah. And then I went and I cut these papers. So you'll see there's a little pause in the video. I cut the papers. And I realized when I cut the papers that I liked it better horizontal. So you'll see I'll come back from cutting in just a few seconds here, and I've changed my mind altogether. So when I cut sometime and I lay things together after cutting, they'll cause me to change my mind. So anyway, I started using some snail glue to put this down. I didn't use my Stampin' Up! Snail because I don't like to go looking for it. Sometimes it was probably in my baskets from the last workshop. And so again, I just grabbed what was closest to me. When I'm creating, I don't have time to think about what product I'm using because I'm really focused on the design. And so that's my biggest challenge as a demonstrator. I'm a new Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, is remembering to kind of use our products. Anyway, I'm layering these different things down. That's the back, and so you'll see on the front it's much more discreet. I wanted very thin lines of color so that they would just bring out the color in the images without being its own separate focal point. So you see here I put it horizontal on the vertical card. So that's what I ended up with. Like the focal point was going to be horizontal, but on a card that is standing vertically. And then I use stamping dimensions. And I like to talk about the fact that please use your edges. Don't throw your stamping dimensionals away just because you only have edges left. It's really cool how you can cut those edges up and like get these different shapes and thinnesses for mounting things. It's really helpful. And remember, nobody sees your dimensionals, you know, because if you put enough on, you know, they're never going to fall off so people can study and see what your shapes were. So I decided to put the ribbon on the top here, and then I changed my mind. So I turned it upside down. I said, okay, let me look at it with this border on the top. And so I spent everything around. I kind of looked at it. Okay, what if the border's on the top? So it's kind of the darker color being on the top seemed to be better balanced to me in my mind. You know, again, as an afterthought, I probably should have had a small strip of the chocolate chip on the bottom too. So I decided to tie a knot, and I just tied a knot there, only because I'm afraid of tying bows on video. I actually do like the bows better, and I'm not bad at it, but I won't do it on YouTube just because either it takes too long or I'm afraid I'll mess it up. So I do knots, and I think knots are really easy to do for most people. So after I made a knot, I start putting down again these strips of stamping dimensionals. I was really running out, and so I was really maximizing my edges. I wasn't concerned about what shape they were, because actually it doesn't really matter what shape they are. If you put enough on, nobody's going to see it and be able to criticize, hey, her shapes for snapping dimensionals were stupid looking. I try to put it everywhere I think the card might droop. So you notice I put one in the middle, and then I decided at the last minute to put a small strip at the very top as well, just to keep the thing, you know, from drooping in the middle. And then I was putting it down, but then I remembered that I always tell you guys, don't put your card together before you stamp. It just makes it impossible to backtrack. So I took it all apart just to live up to my own rule, and I decided to stamp first. And this is where I got really the idea for sparkle. And I decided that since I was glittering up the images, that I would use the sparkle sentiment. And so I pulled out some chocolate chip, keeping my color palette in mind, and kind of kept in mind where my middle piece was going to be. And then I dropped down sparkle. And you saw that I kind of rocked a little bit on the left side. So there's a little tiny dot of chocolate chip where it shouldn't be. Usually that's not a problem at all. Don't stress over those kind of things. I could have backtracked because it wasn't together, but I didn't. It wasn't really worth it. I put these down on each end first, and then the one in the middle, so that I make sure that they're equally spaced. So if you work from the outside edges in, you have a better chance of getting them spaced. I also thought about raising that middle one up an extra stamping dimensional, and I would have if that was the orange, because then it would be more sparkly and would accentuate the word sparkle. But I ended up leaving them all on the same level. It is nice sometimes to change the layers around how you use your stamping dimensionals. So this was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed hearing how I think. Take care, and please come back again.